Right, it's time for all the sports news. Here's Selina Hinchcliffe. Apologies, we don't seem to be able to bring you that right now due to some technical problems, but we will, of course, have a summary of the news for you in around about 15 minutes. But with the latest headlines, now it's time for BBC News. And, now it's time for ABC World News, I should say, seen across the eastern United States a couple of hours ago.
Tonight on World News, shocking sight. Finally, we see the black oil and white gas pouring out of that damaged well into the fishing waters of the Gulf. Video just released. And what do we learn about what may have gone wrong? Stunning survivor, how one little boy managed to survive the horrible plane crash that killed everyone else on board. Startling superwomen, big news about a breed of female CEOs. Why are their salaries suddenly making headlines? And star power, a sixth grader has his Billy Elliot moment, and everybody cheers.
From ABC News headquarters, this is ABC World News with Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. 23 days after the oil rig explosion, finally we see the tape of what is happening 24 hours a day, 5,000 feet deep in the Gulf. And here it is, our first sight of the video of the dark oil and the lighter natural gas gushing into the water off the coast. Why did BP wait so long to release this video, resisting even the White House? We asked Jeffrey Kaufman to take it and show it to the experts and see what we could learn tonight.
You are looking at an ecological disaster in progress. That yellowish geyser is a mix of oil and gas spewing from the ocean floor. The darker it gets, the more oil there is. A conservative estimate, 200,000 gallons of oil each day. After 21 days, at least 4 million gallons. This is the biggest of two leaks escaping from a broken pipe, part of the so-called riser that carried the drill 5,000 feet down.
I'm surprised to see a break that's pretty much wide open, and to me offers some possibilities for maybe sealing it.
What caused the leak? Today in Washington, we finally got an answer. This 5-story high device is the critical blowout preventer on the ocean floor, designed to cut off oil in an accident. BP's internal documents show it was broken.
We have learned from Cameron, the manufacturer of the blowout preventer, that the device had a leak in a crucial hydraulic system and a defectively configured ram.
BP and the manufacturer are blaming each other.
The ineffectiveness of the BOP to control the flow is not the root cause of the event.
BP is scrambling to stop the leak. Their latest plan, the Top Hat. It was lowered to the ocean floor overnight, designed to capture the escaping oil and siphon it to a ship on the surface.
As I said, we're doing everything we can.
Last week you tried to plug the leaks with a huge dome. Now we're reading about a smaller Top Hat dome. If that fails, the solution looks increasingly desperate: to plug the leak with a junk shot of golf balls and old tires. The American people expect your companies to have a technological response to this disaster on par with the Apollo project, not Project Runway.
Now, Diane, I'm standing about a dozen or 15 miles from the tip of the oil slick here in Venice, Louisiana. And for the first time since we've been here in 22 days, we are smelling a strong odor of oil. There's a strong wind coming from the south, blowing the slick towards us.
As we know, the clock has been ticking down since the beginning. I seem to ask you this almost every night, Jeffrey, but tomorrow will we know if that Top Hat works, the latest thing works?
Well, we might. They're actually going to try to put it over the leak and siphon the oil to the surface. They actually told us today they have another scheme they're going to try tomorrow. You know, we saw that for the first time, we saw that big break in the pipe today. They're going to try to insert another pipe within it and see if they can divert the oil that way. They're just throwing everything at this and hoping something works.
It makes a big difference to see what is happening, though. Now we have the visual image in our mind. Thank you, Jeffrey Kaufman. And we're going to move on to the plane crash in Libya. There were 104 people on board the Africa Airways flight from Johannesburg, South Africa to Tripoli. The plane was just seconds from landing. The weather was good, and then shattering disaster. The plane so decimated, everyone perished except one young boy. How on earth did he survive? Here's Jim Sciutto.
The Libyan jet was just short of the runway when it slammed into the ground and disintegrated. It was hard to realize this had even been a plane, except for some rows of seats and the brightly painted tail section. Emergency crews quickly located the black boxes, as well as passports and cell phones. But only that one miraculous survivor, a 10-year-old boy from Holland. We don't know his name yet, just that his parents and 11-year-old sibling did not survive. He has several fractures in both legs, said a doctor. So what brought this plane down? As the Airbus A330 approached Tripoli's airport, according to state media, the pilot radioed a technical fault and asked for ambulances and emergency vehicles.
The extent of the wreckage field, it was doesn't look like it was a very controlled last few seconds of flight.
The plane was brand new, delivered last September, inspected 3 times by European authorities with no apparent problems. Another A330 crashed into the Atlantic last June, killing all on board. The scene on the ground makes the boy's survival all the more remarkable. Since 1970, there have been 15 crashes with lone survivors, most of them children. A 13-year-old French girl survived a crash off the African coast last year. A 4-year-old girl survived this devastating crash in Detroit in 1987. And this 17-year-old German girl was the only survivor of a 1971 crash in Peru. The survival spaces on aircraft are very small, so it may be the smaller you are, the better your chances of escaping something as terrible as this. Jim Sciutto, ABC News, London.
And today in Washington, President Obama greeted Afghan President Hamid Karzai. For all the tension and name-calling recently, the two men said they stand side by side.
We are in a campaign against terrorism together. There are days that we are happy. There are days that we are not happy.
Mr. Karzai also spoke about a visit he paid to injured American troops at Walter Reed Army Hospital.
It was a very difficult moment for me, Mr. President, to meet with a young man, very, very young man who had lost 2 arms and legs. It was heart-rending.
And President Karzai's comments made us think about the 87,000 American men and women standing sentry in Afghanistan tonight. As you may know, their mission verges on the impossible. Vanquish the enemy, but win his village to your side. How do they do that? Bill Weir in Afghanistan investigates for us what that takes for American soldiers day by day.
In a single week, 24-year-old Lieutenant Mark Zambarda has marched his men into fighter-infested mountains under a blazing sun, on an airborne raid under a freezing moon, and was given the Silver Star.
Mark, congratulations.
For bringing captured insurgents through a day-long ambush with no water or radio contact. But his most vital mission of this week? A trip to a local village where he promised to help the school get flush toilets.
Let's do this bathroom and then that bathroom and then...
They can spread that message that, hey, coalition forces build new toilets. You know, it helps us seem that much more legitimate, and people are that much more willing to work with us.
Commanders believe that 90% of the fighters in these mountains are not driven by jihad, but by the need for a job.
Actually, it's still hot. They'll get paid for the attack.
They're paid $5 to $10 per attack by local and Pakistani Taliban with elder approval. So these soldiers hope to win over those powerful elders, one well, one road, one cup of tea at a time. The brigade commander attends town halls called shuras as often as he can, sometimes sitting down with known enemies, and he expects his officers to do the same.
They won't look at themselves as diplomats. They'll say they're battle-hardened soldiers and the bravado all with it, but they are really warrior diplomats.
We saw it up close on a patrol to a notoriously hostile village. The bridge has fresh bullet holes from a recent attack on this company.
Hey, Roger, start heading east.
And they enter in a full defensive crouch, trying to pry information from the tribal elder. He's not much help, but as a gesture of good faith, he offers to walk them out across the open fields, promising the snipers won't shoot if he's by their side.
This is a perfect example of the risk-reward decisions a modern soldier has to make every day.
Intercepted radio chatter confirms that we are under Taliban surveillance the entire time, but they hold their fire. And on the other side, the elder had seized soldiers up for a new retaining wall.
Everything comes at a price, so the big saying over here is scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
It is a dangerous balancing act, but commanders say the strategy is starting to pay off with noticeably fewer attacks and a place long known as the Valley of Death. Bill Weir, ABC News, Kunar Province, Afghanistan.
And a story tonight about a truly strange and unimaginable series of events out of China. Another deadly attack on school children. It's almost an epidemic, leaving baffled officials to ponder what is going on in China. Clarissa Ward is our correspondent in Beijing.
In a hospital this afternoon, parents waited as doctors fought to save their children's lives. The latest attack took place at 8 a.m. at this privately run kindergarten. A 48-year-old man attacked students and teachers with a meat cleaver. China has portrayed the killings as random acts perpetrated by the mentally ill, and media coverage has been minimal. But when we visited a Beijing kindergarten hundreds of miles away, we found parents knew what had happened. Are you afraid? I asked this woman. Even though it was far away, she says, I'm still very worried. The government has set up a panel to address the growing problem and beefed up security at schools and kindergartens.
There are security guards patrolling this school 24 hours, and there are not one but 2 different gates which are closed all day, every day. But this is one of Beijing's elite kindergartens, and not all schools can afford this kind of security.
Today, the government vowed to strike hard against the criminals, but the cause of these attacks remains a terrible mystery. Clarissa Ward, ABC News, Beijing.
And back here at home, medical news making headlines about allergy tests. 30 million Americans believe they have allergies, but a new report today says in reality, maybe only half that do. What is going on? Dr. Richard Besser has been pouring through the study.
There's no question that food allergies can be serious matters for some people, causing sudden and life-threatening reactions that can affect a person's ability to breathe. But what about those people who experience mild symptoms in reaction to a food? Nearly 10% of people believe they have food allergies, yet only half of them truly do. We went to one of the country's leaders in food allergy, Dr. Hugh Sampson, to sort this out.
How do you know if you have a food allergy? A lot of people out there have been told they have a food allergy when they in fact don't.
There are 3 types of tests you can have to find out if you really have a food allergy. A skin test, the most common test where your skin is pricked with a particle of food to look for a skin reaction, blood tests which detect antibodies to a particular food, and a food challenge which involves introducing small amounts of the food you're suspected of being allergic to and watching to see if you have symptoms. The problem is, half the time the skin test and the blood test just get it wrong.
And Rich, what does this mean about getting retested? Should we all do that?
Well, you know, the good news is 85% of children will get over their food allergies over time. So if you're a child, every 2 years get evaluated. Adults every 4 to 5 years. If you didn't have symptoms to begin with and were diagnosed with this, be reevaluated now. The important thing is don't challenge yourself with the offending food because you don't know which group you fall into.
Yeah, be sure you find out first.
Exactly.
And still ahead, some eye-opening news about what may be a new breed of super women CEOs. What are their salaries? Teach women everywhere. And a brave 6th grade boy who took a chance and left the whole school cheering.
ABC World News with Diane Sawyer.
You're watching BBC News. A reminder of our headlines this hour. Standing side by side, Britain's new leaders get down to business on day 1 of the UK's first coalition government in 7 decades. Deciding who sits where, David Cameron's coalition cabinet takes shape with 1 or 2 surprises around the table. You're watching BBC News. As promised, we will bring you all the sports news with Selina Hinchcliffe. But first, let's return now to ABC World News.
We are used to hearing that women's salaries are just a fraction of that of men for the same job. But get ready for a surprise. Tonight, a brand new report from Bloomberg News about one small group of women. Bloomberg, by the way, is the leading provider of business news worldwide. And ABC's Bianna Golodriga has what's new.
The new report shows that women who run the nation's largest companies, the 16 female CEOs of S&P 500 companies, are far out earning their male counterparts. Their average annual pay over the last few years, just over $14 million.
That means women earned 40% more than men in 2009.
Think of them as a kind of super breed. Carol Bartz, the CEO of Yahoo, has a pay package of $47 million. Kraft CEO Irene Rosenfeld's is $26 million. And Indra Nooyi of PepsiCo's is $16 million.
It's kind of like the 16 Supercorp women are doing well, and that's a good sign, but it's not good enough.
In fact, women workers as a whole earn just 79% of the wages earned by men. So what do these 16 know that others don't? For one thing, they clearly have honed serious skills at the negotiating table. Studies have shown that most women are far less aggressive in negotiations than men. Take a look at this ABC News Behavior Lab. The volunteers were told they would be paid between $5 and $12 for their time participating in a study. All were offered the minimum. Take a look at how men and women differed in their reactions.
I would like the max, of course.
More than half of the men asked for more money, but only a third of the women bargained for more.
$5 okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Of course, giant systemic barriers exist in the workplace that impact a woman's career as well. The 16 women at the top benefit from one thing most don't have going for them. They work for public companies run by boards who can't afford to be seen as shortchanging women while the world looks on. The hope is the few who have made it can start that change from the top.
If my job went out there with that kind of earning, I guess I'd want to make a real commitment to seeing that every woman in my company was paid fairly. If I'm being paid like that, I want all of you to be paid fairly, absolutely.
And on the subject of transparency, the report also found that female CEOs at smaller companies, those that are less high profile than those in the S&P 500, make a lot less than their male counterparts, so that Super 16 is not quite the norm yet, Diane.
But they've blazed some kind of trail, and because their salaries can be seen in part. Bianca Godot, thank you so much tonight. Supreme Court nominee Elena Kagan began making the traditional visits to senators today. She talked some serious talk about issues, but it was also a charm offensive and found time to talk about pizza and Chicago food with one senator. And an August professor appeared on Capitol Hill today, believe it or not, to talk about an equal number of restrooms for women and men in all new federal buildings. Professor Catherine Anthony, an architect, said she was doing it for grandmothers and pregnant friends and told Congress it is about time.
We watch our male counterparts zip in and out of the restroom in a flash, while at the ladies' room, we're stuck waiting in long lines.
And she said it's a form of gender discrimination. And we have a death to note tonight, the last of the legendary Ziegfeld girls. Doris Eaton Travis was just 14 years old in 1918. She lied about her age so she could don those fabulous feathers and dance in the lavish Ziegfeld pageants that graced the Broadway stage. She stayed a hoofer all her life, continuing to dance right past her 100th birthday. She was 106 years old. End of an era. And finally tonight, a story that struck us as part Billy Elliot, part Glee, if you watch the TV show about some high school misfits singing their hearts out. At a middle school in Oklahoma, a boy took the dare. His heart pounding, but the only one brave enough to get up in front of his entire school and perform. And not a safe song. David Muir has his command performance.
It was the annual spring concert at this school in Edmond, Oklahoma. And Grayson Chance, a sixth grader, began playing what at first sounded like any other recital. But with hundreds of his peers watching, a sudden realization that Grayson was about to sing, of all things, Lady Gaga's Paparazzi. Look at the two girls on his right. They smile as they realize what he was trying to do. It was a song his music teacher told us late today she initially thought might not be the best choice. After all, sixth grade can be a rough place.
So he was the only boy who got up there and sang a solo.
Right. The rest were girls.
Baby, you'll be famous, chase you down into
And with that, the only boy to take the stage on his own at that Oklahoma school bowed and exited stage right. David Muir, ABC News, New York.
Way to go. And by the way, 1.3 million people have watched that on YouTube so far. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Time now for all the sports news. As promised, here's Selena.
Hello there.